Every single week in my junk journals and just my general creating always looks completely different, and so I wanted to show you what I've been working on this week in my junk journal. So if you saw my last video, you know that I am doing the February collage challenge, and that has been the main focus of the pages that I've been working on this week. It's actually been really interesting to kind of see how I can translate them into something that's a little bit more my style, and I think it's also pushing me out of my comfort zone a little bit this week, so it has been super fun to work on. So in this video I'm going to show you a flip through of the pages that I have worked on this week, and I'm also going to show you the process of how some of these collages came together and discuss the process of how I go about thinking about some of the prompts when they aren't necessarily like super obvious in terms of what I might want to do in my journals. So I've got the insert that I made specifically for this challenge, which I showed the process of how I made that in my last video, so I'll leave a link down below if you want to check that out. But essentially I just took a secondhand book and trimmed it down to size to use, and I was a little bit hesitant whether to put the February title on this cover itself, so I decided to leave it off. And what I actually did was I just sort of included it here on the inside and figured that would be a nice way to title this. I haven't stuck it down, I've put it in with a clip because I feel like a little bit on the fence, but I think I'll just sort of leave it here and see how I feel about it, and that way then I can just leave this cover as is, because I think sometimes less is more when it comes to journal covers. And I don't know about you, but sometimes, you know, when you're working on something and you add too much and you can kind of like overwork things and you just think, wow, I wish I hadn't done that. Like, you can't take some things back off a page without like covering it up again, and so I didn't want to end up in that situation, so that's why I've just popped it here for now, and I can always add something else to it if I want to later down the line. So the page that I did here for the first prompt, the prompt was boom, and I just sort of thought about doing like these almost like a little bit of like a burst, like a almost explosion kind of vibe, but just having these little cut out triangles here in different colors and having it sort of like burst out of this little window that I've got here. So this is obviously just a junk mail envelope, and then I've just used this little cutout here of, I think this is a pear, and I've just put it sort of like inside the window here, so it's kind of like a bursting out. Super simple just in terms of like a few bits of papers and some text here, but I just thought that this would be like an easy way to start the page and to have something that goes across both pages, but without me needing to focus like collage on both, because what I want to do is just have like one page, like each side be one of the prompts. So you'll see here on the next page I've got prompt 2 and then prompt 3, so that's kind of how I'm dividing the pages rather than feeling like I need to do like the entire spread each day. So I just wanted to keep it super simple to one side of the page. The second prompt was toast, and I was a little bit unsure about how I wanted to approach this because I didn't really want to stick a picture of toast in my journal as much as I love toast. So what I decided to do was use the colors of toast, so stay with me. So when I was thinking obviously toast, you think kind of like the burnt like brown toast, and then also like butter yellow. So I used that as my inspiration for my color scheme for my page. So you could look at this and not know that I used the prompt of toast, and I think I kind of prefer it that way. So I ended up just being able to do a collage here with like a little cutout flower and a frame, and some bits of cut out wording here, and just using the prompt as a jumping off point. So, you know, you don't always need to do like a literal interpretation when you're doing a prompt. I think I've said this before with like the junk journal challenges that I've done in the past. It's just like a spark of inspiration just to get you started, to get the ball rolling, and to create something within your journals that you potentially might not have like created without, you know, getting that head start with the prompt. And so yeah, that's what I did for the prompt of toast. And so for day 3, the prompt was ballet, and I was thinking and sort of jotting down ideas of what I might want to do that was inspired by ballet, but I felt I couldn't really get around not having like an actual image of something to do with ballet on the page. So I just found this image on Unsplash, I think it was, just like a royalty-free image that I cut out, and I decided to use the flowers that I normally cut out in my pages and sort of give her like a little pink floral tutu, and do a collage like that. And then I just did my normal sort of like background collages and things, and you'll notice I'm using frames in a lot of these pieces, and I'm kind of using that as a little bit of like an anchor and almost a theme throughout each of the pages, to have something framed on these, just to create a little bit of continuity, I suppose, between the pages. And I just cut out some wording here that says everlasting flowers, just to link with obviously the floral imagery that we've got going on here. And I popped it sort of behind the image as well, just to give a little bit of depth and dimension to the page here. Yeah, kept that one fairly simple, to be honest. I didn't want to spend too long each day working on these pages. Now, this page is another example of one of those prompts where I wasn't really sure what to do, because I also didn't want to stick a piece of broccoli in my page. Not a literal piece of broccoli, but like an image of a piece of broccoli is just not really what I wanted in my journal. And so I was really brainstorming as well, and thinking about like what could be my like creative interpretation of the prompt. So in that way, this has been a really good exercise this month so far in sort of pushing myself to like think about these things. And so I ended up going, okay, well, broccoli and like vegetables, I guess it's like eat your greens that they always used to say when you were growing up. So I decided just to use this picture of some foliage, and I drew and cut out the words eat your greens so that the paper underneath shows through. And then I just cut out some extra bits here of leaves and had them sort of poking out from the wording, just to, I guess, add a little bit more interest. So again, something super simple. Can't say it's my favorite, but it was, you know, fun nonetheless to kind of think about how I could interpret that prompt. And that was probably one of those ones where it could have been very easy for me to just like not do the prompt, but I really wanted to have a go at least. And obviously not everything has to be like an amazing like page in this journal. It's just about creating something each day and just practicing. So, you know, having a go at this sort of different collage technique, because it might be something that I think, oh, actually, this cutout idea, maybe it's something that I could explore in a future journal page, or a technique just to try and see how I can incorporate it in a different way. So yeah, that is my broccoli interpretation. And then the page for day 5, so the prompt was star. So something a little bit more in my comfort zone, I guess. And I didn't realize until I got to this page, but this book actually had stars on this page. I guess because this book is about like map reading and things, it's to do with sort of finding your way by using the stars. I just thought it was a really nice coincidence that the prompt for star ended up falling on this star page. And so the collage that I did for this prompt, I actually used some gold foil from some chocolate wrappers, so proper junk journal style, and also little stars here that were from some cardboard that I cut out. So you never know when these things that you hoard might come in handy for a journal page. So I used those as my stars, and then I just sort of did like a more generic collage. Had to have some florals in there, of course, even though it's not really a star. I just thought it added some colour. And then I included this piece of text here that I'd cut out from a magazine because it kind of felt like stars. Favourite poems to fill your head with dreams. I was just thinking about like dreams and like the night sky and that sort of thing. So that's kind of why I thought it felt fitting to have that on this page for the prompt of star. And then the next page was also a prompt that was slightly different to some of the prompts that I'm used to working on. So this prompt was jellyfish, and after doing a bit of Googling and looking at images of jellyfish, I decided to take some inspiration from their sort of like translucent effect, and also their little tentacles, are they? I don't know what they're called. So I decided to take some inspiration from their like translucent effect by using some layered tissue paper, as you can see here. And then after stitching those together, I just left some of the thread dangling, I guess a little bit like the jellyfish tentacles almost. Again, I wanted to do something that was still, you know, having a go at the actual prompt itself, but doing it in a bit more of an abstract way and a bit more of a subtle way, I suppose. That meant I was still able to work, you know, in the way that I normally work in my journals, and just be able to sort of translate it into how I normally collage in my journals. So I used that as my background, and then I did also glue some words that I'd cut out underneath some of the layers of the tissue paper to kind of you know, push them back a little bit, but I'm not sure if I like that, so I might end up covering that up, but I've just left it for now. And then I used one of these little Kodak frames as my sort of centerpiece, cut out a flower that sort of is poking out of the frame, and then used a piece of text here just from a book, just to say it certainly does not seem as interesting at first sight, because I thought that kind of went with the whole like translucent effects. And you can see here I've actually glued a piece of little botanical imagery to the background here, so you kind of don't necessarily see it completely at first glance, but it is there, sort of you know, details that are hiding in the back of the piece. So that is my take on jellyfish. Really random, I know, but I actually really had fun with the process of thinking about how I could put this together. And then for the final page this week, the prompt was rain, and so I decided to keep this one really simple and just use a few collage elements. So the prompt rain made me think of one of my favorite phrases that I think I've included in quite a few journals at this point: no rain, no flowers. I used my typewriter to add that onto just a piece of scrapbook paper here, tore it out, and then added it onto this background of a floral image that I'd cut out from a book. And then again, like I mentioned earlier, with using a frame on all of the pieces, I just decided to add a frame around this because I just felt like it gave me a little bit of a focal point, and I think that's how I was using this with most of these, was to have something framed. So obviously the little frame here to kind of give a focal point, even though there's quite a lot going on like across the whole page. Here again, it kind of draws your eye to it. This one's probably the only one actually that doesn't have a frame on it, but all the rest, as you can see, there's that sort of framed element to them. That was this week in my junk journals. I'd love to know what you have been working on this week in your journals. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.